Hello, welcome back to That's How It Is. My name is Gemma Edwards and our guest today is Pikachulita. In this video, we are talking about the importance of intersectionality and our personal responsibility to continue to educate ourselves. I really hope you enjoy the video. There we go.
Right.
This is Pikachulita, everyone. The name is really, really tiny down there, but there is a link in the chat. We were just talking about Twitch sort of based stuff and improvements that are or aren't happening. And you've been on Twitch since 2014, so nearly 10 years?
Yes.
Right? So I've only been here 3 years. So have you seen a lot of change over the last 10 years or Twitch trying, or what do you think they could be doing more of?
That's the beauty of nuance, right? Is that two things can be true at once.
Yeah.
There has been a lot of improvements that have been made since 2014. I mean, 2014 was pretty much like the Wild West.
Yeah, I was going to say. I can
We
imagine what it would
had,
be.
yeah, it was a completely different environment, a completely different
It's like
ecosystem.
4chan, just on its own somewhere.
Right.
In the
You didn't
abyss.
have as many moderation tools. Even outside of Twitch, you didn't have big and vocal groups made up
Yeah.
of just marginalized individuals. Like you didn't have a group of, Black women gamers like Black Girl Gamers or the Noir Network, Team Transmission, which is the Twitch team of trans streamers. You didn't have things like that existed. So obviously we've come a long way, but there's still so much more that needs to be done. And the problem is a lot of the time when Twitch makes these improvements, they happen a little too late.
Yeah.
Just kind of like the responses to the hate raids. That was the moment that they finally brought in verifying
Like
your
Shield as well.
being able to change your setting to where you have to verify your email
Yeah.
or a phone number or something like that. And just different little features that to us as marginalized individuals are kind of like no-brainers.
Like, yeah, and it's like, it's not just, it's not,
Yeah.
can I have this really fun, silly little thing? It's like, this is my actual safety.
Yeah, but it's not something that they even have to think about. So it's one of those things for them. It's probably out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
But that's very much our lived reality. This is stuff to us that just seems, obvious, but apparently it's not to them. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found that like working where I work and in different companies is so astounding. The things that you just think are complete and utter common sense, other
Right.
people are just like, oh wow, yeah, and you're just think, oh my god.
Yeah, because
Right.
you do a lot of work with like diversity, inclusion, equity as well, don't you? And you do at work, but it's like sometimes it depends who's listening, doesn't it? And I think you have a really tough time at work because basically everyone is old white men, so they all think A, they don't want to hear this shit. B, I've read a lot of people saying how, like, I think it was an American statistic, but it was something like companies had put 8 billion into diversity seminars and teaching, and it actually was having the opposite effect because it pissed men off so much that they were purposefully then either mistreating women, or they were just more likely to then hire men, promote men, because they were like sick of women having these opportunities given to them just because they're women and taking the opportunity from men.
It's hard to push through that wall, and yeah, 100%. You're always going to have people who are trying to sabotage whatever it is. I think that it's better to change things if you can get inside from the inside, but there has to be a line, and everyone's line's different. I've seen some really great people leave industries and businesses that I've worked for in the past because they just think, I cannot do this anymore. Like I can't be this person. And I think that's the danger, that through like fear, a lot of it's fear. The people running the business, or the senior people, they don't want to say the wrong thing. So what they do is they pull marginalized people forwards to tell them what to do, but actually what you're doing is just putting so much more pressure on.
Yeah, so I'm going to put you
these
in this
people.
lion's den, and by the way, you are now all black people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
everything
and
that we
see-
think about you and how you pass this exam or how you do this job or how you bring in this bid, the same for women as well. Like you now, if you don't bring in a bid at work, women can't bring in bids.
Yeah.
If a man can't bring in
Yeah.
a bid at work, that one man just didn't have a great day that day, and tomorrow is fine.
Right.
Whereas I feel like anyone that's more marginalized, you're kind of carrying your entire community on your back at all times, and anything you might
Yeah.
possibly fail at, maybe not even fail, just not fucking win. It's like you've taken 100 steps back, and there's always that fear of then maybe just not trying because you don't want to be that one that
You
fucks
feel
it
like
up
you're
for
gonna
everyone
fail
else.
anyway.
Yeah, and if you do a job sort of as a woman and then you fuck it up or something goes wrong or whatever happens, you see, women can't handle pressure. Women get too emotional.
Well, and the biggest issue with that is, are there certain people that are willing to do that mental and emotional labor to, take the reins in these sort of situations? Absolutely. But the problem is they expect for all people to be that way. And the reality is a lot of people aren't, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Not everybody is equipped, and not everybody really has the quite frankly, the spoons to be able to do this. And even if somebody starts out thinking they can do it, it may get too hard for them to do. I mean, I've been talking about this stuff for a very long time.
Yeah,
right?
you're very active and like vocal.
Yeah. And there are even some times where it gets very tiring. It gets very burnt out, especially when you feel like everything that you're trying to do is just falling on deaf ears a lot of the time. And it's
like, why
it's
should I
very
have to be the
demoralizing
vocal
and
one?
frustrating. Yeah, exactly. So, but it's one of those situations where you're essentially coming in and uprooting essentially the foundations of society. You're uprooting everything that these people have ever known, and they're resisting it. And that's why ideally the goal is to, and unfortunately it has to be phased out, because the problem is you have a lot of people that just sort of sit in these positions for years and years and years. But the end goal is to essentially, phase them out to where you don't have these people that are being so resistant to change at the top and calling the shots anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. It's about not just getting to the point where those people are gone or kind of like waiting, like a waiting game. It's about kind of while we're on that journey, you might not ever win those people over, right? Those people in charge, they're going to retire in 2 years. They don't care. They don't care about any of this stuff. But I guess from like the bottom up, you can kind of try and bring in the right kind of people. The problem is there, if you bring in a lot of diverse talent, diversity of thought, if the culture is not inclusive that you're bringing them into, they will just leave. I've been on a journey myself with starting off my career with loads of internalized misogyny, little knowledge of the world beyond what I had experienced, which was very sheltered, to where I am now, which is kind of not all the way there. But I've kind of got to the point now where I'm thinking, if I'm going to go into a space, especially with work, and I can't be who I am, which is quite vocal, I don't want to work here. And kind of getting to that point and being like, well, if you don't want me, I'll go somewhere else because someone else will.
I think that honestly, all of us in some capacity at some level of our life have some internalized misogyny. I've been there. I'm sure that anyone, whether you're, a woman or regardless of your gender identity, has been there at some point, unfortunately. It's important for so many of us to unlearn that, because a lot of that is reflective in kind of how we interact with ourselves. And I think part of unpacking that is being honest with our emotions and saying, these things that I'm feeling, they're okay, they're normal. I don't have to be in the situation. But like you said, it's important to acknowledge that everybody does not have that sort of luxury. It's survival for a lot of us to remain in these sorts of environments that are not as, welcoming to us. And like, there was a huge dialogue about all the issues with Twitch, and people automatically said that like, heading to another platform was the answer. And it's like, I hate to break it to you, but this is a symptom of the overall society. This is not something that you're going to escape by moving to another platform. Granted, that other platform may have better moderation tools or something like that. Whatever works for you works for you. But let's not act like moving platforms is the ultimate answer, the end all be all here. These issues with, transphobia, homophobia, misogyny, trans misogyny, racism, misogynoir, everything, even ableism is going to be present everywhere. Regardless.
The platform's not the problem, it's societal, the issues. Like you say, move to another platform if that makes you more comfortable. But if you're trying to solve these problems, the platform's not the issue. You're not solving the actual problem here.
With everything that's sort of diversity, equity, inclusion, and the companies are trying or they're doing their best or whatever, but it's like so many of them, it can be a corporate tick box. And I mean, International Women's Day can also be a bit of a corporate tick box at times. And it's just like, how do you get it past being that and just being something that is just done? I feel like in the same Twitch and the online space and the gaming space, it's definitely can be like that sometimes. And so can more corporate jobs. It's just something they want to say that they're doing it. And they want to put on this seminar and have you run it, but it's like, you can enforce it, they sit there, but you can't enforce it, they listen. And then it's like, there's so many other things, like we were just talking about, the culture that need to change for people to even want to listen or be interested to listen. Even if they don't agree with you, it's like, at least be interested in having the debate. But it's like, I feel like those are almost smaller adjustments but we're kind of trying to go from the top with these big adjustments it can be quite polarizing for men especially. I was reading this horrible stat earlier about basically how men won't listen to women. So they need a man to say it. And it's like, how do you get a man to say it when you're a woman? So it's like nothing I say is anyone's going to listen to. It's a long journey and a slow journey. You've been doing it for a long time, very active, and obviously you're part of a lot of groups that like really champion diversity and work really hard to bring other people in as well. I'm like nearly 33, so I'm a little bit older than a lot of people that are sort of in my space on Twitch, and it's just trying to clear those barriers for people after me as well, because I think I read another statistic today that they thought that the wage gap was going to close by 2059, and they've just redone it basically, and they've said 2119 now. They don't expect it to be closed until then, and that's not even in my lifetime.
Wow, I'm not even expecting it by then, to tell you the truth.
I'm sure they'll add another 50 years on by then. Yeah.
Right. They'll keep adding to it. And then obviously I think a huge part of that is also dependent on just how our, country's leadership goes over the years, because that could either speed it up or set it back, or a little bit of both. But I think one of the biggest keys to like avoiding making stuff like this, like you said, just a corporate tick box or, virtue signaling, is basically just being mindful of what you do throughout the rest of the year. If you're like in a corporate setting, or just any sort of platform entity, whatever, if you're, sitting here doing Women's History Month events and or putting up posters, if you're in a physical location, putting up posters around the office, things like that. And then, all the other times of the year when it's not this month, you're not properly handling, employee sexual assault or sexual harassment claims that come from women, or you're not putting women in any leadership positions, then it's very obvious that they're doing this just to sort of, check off that tick box or whatever. And as it, kind of relates on the race side of things, like we saw that a lot after the murder of George Floyd. Like you had all these companies that were flocking to do XYZ and to highlight Black creators and things like that. And even people on an individual level, you had a lot of people that were trying to satiate white guilt and were like, tag your favorite Black streamer and blah, blah, blah. Not only was that inappropriate because it's like you're shifting someone's murder about Twitch streamers. So that's already weird, but it's people, like I said, people were doing it to sort of satiate their guilt and feel better and to look better. But then what we notice is, and this really, I think is the case to my knowledge, because of just, different, my peers and mutuals basically mentioning how outside of these event months, like specifically here on Twitch, our viewership, there's a dramatic difference. You have people that come in during Black History Month and you'll have inflated numbers during these event months. And then any other time of the year, unless you're like have a specific front page slot, these people aren't staying around. So that's the sort of thing as well, in terms of like, as it relates to Twitch, where it really feels like, again, that corporate tick box or that personal little tick box. So I think the biggest part of avoiding that is to normalize it, to make this a very year-round thing, to not just be inclusive during specific months, but 24/7, 365. Because the reality of it is I don't have just a month that I'm a queer Black woman.
I just exist for this month and then I'll be quiet.
Right, exactly. Like this is me. This is who I am. This is me 24/7, 365. So I don't get to flip it on and off. So because of that, that's, how it should be for people that are like self-labeled allies. Because if I don't get to stop being, a Black queer woman, you don't get to stop being an ally, and you don't get ally fatigue. Quite frankly, it's bullshit. Yes.
I absolutely agree. I've had something recently at work where men, like the cis white men who hold platforms, for them to tell stories about this kind of stuff is really powerful, because they then, like you said earlier, other men listen to them more, and if they can tell stories. And what I get back a lot of the times is like, oh, I don't feel comfortable like sharing that, in this kind of environment. I don't feel comfortable. And it's like, okay, well, good for you, because like you also, just
do you
said,
think women are walking around feeling comfortable like ever?
Right. For the people who this affects negatively, they don't have that choice. They come in to this space and they are a woman. They come into this space and they're a Black person. They come into this space. They can't make a choice to be like, oh, I'm not comfortable sharing that part of my life with you. They have to, whether they want to or not. So the least you could do is try and, you know, be a little bit vulnerable and be a little bit more open
Yeah.
to help those people. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, I definitely wrote something in my long thing of notes that I absolutely cannot read about men actually stepping out of their comfort zone. I know it's uncomfortable to say to somebody to their face in real life, you shouldn't say that. Don't say that. Like that, it's hard to say. Yeah, it's not comfortable, but like, you don't get to be comfortable for a fucking split second. Sometimes I think I've definitely caught people out of the blue when I'm DJing, and sometimes stuff will come up. We don't have a relationship. I'm not their friend. I'm not in their little WhatsApp, like, boys' locker room. But like, I will say, like, don't say that. And it's like, oh. And then I think they think, oh, I've offended her. And it's like, it's not about me.
Yeah.
It's like, you are offensive just as a whole. It's not just to me. Like the things that I'm saying anyway, obviously some things could just be personally offensive to me. But a lot of it is just like what you're doing is the problem. It's not that I'm being soft or I'm being sensitive or, you know, I'm being woke now and I'm saying, oh, suddenly we shouldn't say that. It's like, you should have never been fucking saying it. But just now people are sort of saying a little bit more to your face. You shouldn't be saying that.
Yeah.
And they're suddenly like, oh.
Right. Well, and that's really the biggest thing, right? And people don't want to address the elephant in the room, but it's like you're not going to make real change if the entities in power, and in this case, we know who sits at the top of society, we know who sits at the top of the hierarchy. It's cishet white men. And obviously there's different intersections, and I don't know why the subject of intersectionality just is not, people don't comprehend it. But when you have the people sitting at the top that are not willing to accept change or to want to do better, you're not going to really get much done. So that is why you have to have people with the privilege within that demographic that have to do the heavy lifting. For example, even within the Black community, you know, colorism is an issue. There are not enough people like me who are light skinned who are speaking out about the necessary things. And as it relates to, you know, gender identity, you know, you don't have the, you know, cis het folks who are sitting here. You don't have enough of them. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty. I have some wonderful people in my community who do that. But the reality of it is they're in the minority. The majority of society is not like that. So if you don't have the people that hold the most power in society, you know, aligning themselves with you and actually being willing to do the work to unpack a lot of internalized, you know, isms and phobias and things like that, and are willing to put forth that effort, which is very uncomfortable. You may get your hands dirty, and borderline in different ways can be violent and can upset people, but you have to be willing to do that. Otherwise, we're not going to go anywhere. And it's not to say that, you know, we're not capable of making our own changes. That's not it. We're busting our asses to try to, you know, make things better, to make a change. But again, it doesn't matter. Just like, for example, there's a larger conversation to be had where people like to point the wrong fingers, specifically in America, about people voting. When in reality, it's like we can't guilt like people like Black and brown folks into voting when we do vote and our numbers are, you know, are record-breaking numbers, but then you either have the majority of people, the non-marginalized folks, who either swing the vote, or people who are rigging things and being corrupt. So it's like, how can we make change like that? You know what I mean? It's just people don't understand that there's a lot more depth to these things than what they truly realize, and placing the blame on marginalized people and acting like they're not fighting hard enough or doing enough is absolute utter bullshit.
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around like pushing for change, where people can often assume it's like for you just want to push for change for just you, and I don't want to listen to you, so I'm disconnected from this, when actually it's like, not only is it for your entire community, but it's for the whole world and the future, and ultimately for them too. And I know they can't see that, and I feel like a lot of people probably won't ever see that, but it's like a war on women is a war on us all. And it's like, if we had all the women, like, you know, scientists, like everything, if everybody was at their full capacity of being able to live to the fullest of where their talent would take them, or their knowledge or their story, we would know so much more, so much faster, and we'd have so much more as a culture. And instead it's just like, shh, they just don't want to even think about that. And it's like, and everyone would benefit. You know, like, men would benefit from happier women. Like, if you don't want to listen to me complaining all the time, like, you wouldn't have to. if the world wasn't so shit, and it's just like having those things happen constantly and having to bring them up, and then men are like, oh, it's just kind of annoying to listen to, like, and it's like, well, help then.
Yeah.
If this was
And
lifted.
you made a really good point when you said, like, a war on women is a war on us all. And I think that's the problem, right? So many people like to isolate themselves and think that they're excluded from a lot of this stuff. Prime example is, trans misogyny. People like me and, people within my community, I have dear friends of mine, trans folks who have literally been preaching to the mountains about how cis women need to understand that attacking trans women and throwing trans women under the bus affects even you,
Yeah.
because we're seeing it to like begin how we've been saying this for so long, but we're seeing it start to begin in a lot of this, legislation that's being proposed, like how there was, I think, one in like Texas. No disrespect to anybody in chat that's from Texas, but I'm not really surprised because that's a dig at the leadership, not to y'all. Or maybe it was Florida. I'm not sure. But then again, no
One of the
surprise
ones.
there.
One of them.
Yeah, one of those two. They're usually the culprits. It was a bill that was like basically proposing hormone testing or body checking. It was something very invasive for girls to be able to play in girls' sports and things like that.
I think I read about this.
And as somebody who at one point in her life, probably like in 7th, 8th grade, I'm a cis woman, but I had elevated levels of testosterone and things like that. And basing womanhood around, whether or not you can reproduce or your hormones, et cetera, like that impedes us all. And this is very common in and amongst Black women, where you will see cis women who get accused of being men, basically. And I say accused because that's literally what they're trying to paint it as, like, you're secretly a man or something like this. And then trying to, I mean, it's disgusting regardless, but especially when you're trying to bar them from things like sports. And that's a direct impact of trans misogyny. So people, the problem is like I said, people isolate themselves and don't realize that they are also impacted by these issues. And that's why it's important to, in a lot of different ways and a lot of different facets of intersectionality, it's important for you to, without obviously co-opting their experience, you essentially need to adopt somebody's experience as your own.
Absolutely.
Like, marginalized individuals have to stick together like that, because these people at the top, we're all the same to them. There needs to be no hierarchy amongst us.
Absolutely. And I don't know in America what if you have the same like terminology for things, but over here we definitely call it white feminism. And the danger of white feminism. And I meet a lot of people who, not through any kind of malicious intent, a lot of women who are what we would call, white feminists. You have to kind of sit down and explain to them, if you're not fighting this fight for every single person, for all of the intersectionalities, you're not fighting for equality, you're fighting for a slice of that pie, that power pie. You're fighting to be up there, but leaving everybody else down. Yeah, you're fighting to join like the oppressor, basically. And why would you want to do that? I think that particularly here in the UK at the moment, we have loads of stuff in the media and loads of trans misogyny and general trans hate happening, being perpetuated by the media. So I really, thanks for saying what you said. And it really resonates with me. And I think it's so important.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, it's definitely a huge thing here to do white feminism, which is one reason why, because I, admittedly in the past, and not saying that, not policing what people call themselves, but I used to use that label as being called a feminist. But then I learned about womanism and how that's a term that was created by a Black woman that's more inclusive, and it's an inclusive form it's a more inclusive form of feminism, because now feminism has become something that is very much centered around white feminism. Even looking back when I was younger, thinking about the sort of woman empowerment sort of concepts that I was taught, like about like Susan B. Anthony, for example. And then you don't find out until, you get older that she was a racist and was basically saying, I deserve the right to vote before Black people do.
Yeah.
And then you're just realizing, like, why is this just getting taught like this? Why were we taught that this was a wonderful person? You know what I mean? And this kind of reminds me of something that happened to me. I believe it was the first time I was on the front page. I got a front page time slot. It was for Women's History Month a couple of years ago. And obviously Women's History Month comes right after Black History Month. And it was funny to me because somebody had came in my chat, because I always say, we get trolls and very, very angry, hateful people that come in, and it happens. But like they came in and were like, you just got last month, you can't have this month too. Basically saying that because I had
Yeah.
Black History
I've
Month,
actually
I
seen a
can't have
few
Women's History
comments
Month.
like that.
What?
Yeah, that was the first time that I had seen it. And then there was another time, I think I was streaming like Little Nightmares 2, and
I played Little
somebody had
Nightmares.
came in and was I can't, and I should know this because I have a whole history degree. They came in mentioning to repeal, I believe, whatever amendment that gave women the right to vote in the US. And I made it into a joke because I was like, joke's on you, buddy. I didn't earn the right. I wouldn't have earned the right to vote when, that
Yeah.
amendment was introduced because I'm a Black woman.
Yeah.
So it's like, but like I said, there's so much of that intersectionality that is missing from even white feminism.
Mhm.
Realistically, it's just tone ignorant because like a lot of the symbolism and the imagery that we associate with like feminism is essentially exclusive,
Mhm.
Yeah.
whether it's intentional or unintentionally exclusive to a lot of other groups that get
Yeah.
left out of the conversation.
I mean, even the
And
word femme,
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like
exactly.
femininity, and what we think of as femme is just
Right.
like pretty, young, long hair, probably blonde hair, like all
Right.
those things that are like feminizing, having feminizing surgeries or like feminine features. And like when men will complain about being called feminine looking or whatever, and it's like that's the patriarchy again, and it's
Yeah.
like, why would you listen? Like it's against
Right.
you too. But it's like they just
there's
don't read it like that.
the
but-
problem is there's so many layers to it and it's so nuanced. And then again, there's so much intersectionality involved. It's like, yeah, obviously women across society experience these issues, but it's like you have to again factor in the intersectionality about it. Look at trans women, look at Black women, look at Black trans women, look at Indigenous women, look at fat women, look at disabled women,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. Like it's just so many layers to it, but then also add like horizontal layers, so it's
Yeah.
just a whole bunch of different layers, like going in every different direction,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. And you're right, it's nuanced. And as a white woman, I had to go on a real journey to educate myself. And it's still every day, I'm learning something new. And I'm sure you guys feel the same. Every day you kind of think, okay, I could be better at this, I could be better at that. So yeah, if you're scared about going on that journey or scared of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing or anything, we all have the same fears.
We've all
not
said the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's not about what you say. People are going to slip up, people are going to do the wrong things just out because they don't know. Ignorance, it's more about the intention behind what it is you're trying to do. If you're trying,
Right.
if your intentions are good, no one's going to cancel you. No one's going to come out and and all this stuff.
And that's such a scapegoat that they do, is like acting.
I won't
like,
even try.
Just for example, Me Too movement, we saw it happening across different fields, film, like the entertainment industry, like gaming here on Twitch, like it impacted multiple communities. There was a certain actor, he's very attractive on the outside, but it has nothing but jelly beans jiggling around in that skull of his, be acting as if because of this movement, like it's harder to work with women, or you can't even ask them on dates or flirt with them.
Oh my God, you can't even hug women in the workplace.
Hard. It's really not as hard as you think it is. Like, I say this as a queer woman, like I don't have to wake up every day and figure out how I'm gonna avoid sexually harassing another woman. You know what I mean? Like,
I know.
Or I don't wake up and actively have to think, how do I avoid being transphobic?
Just
like,
keep your hands in your pockets at all times.
Right.
Otherwise, I might accidentally grope a woman in the street. I don't know.
I know.
Right.
And,
like, do you not hear yourself?
I know.
How ridiculous this sounds?
And also how against
I don't
men that
actively
is.
have to do that.
Yeah.
Because I don't, and that's why, like, especially that's a huge thing in and amongst Twitch, right? Where you have all these cishet white men that are complaining about this made up cancel culture.
I always say cancel culture doesn't exist. Like, thank you for saying that, because that makes me so. I get it with artists, because I DJ. I get it all the time, and I'm like, don't play this artist, don't play that artist. People just don't know or don't care, and somebody will be convicted. I'm not just rumors, like convicted, and then they'll headline a festival 2 months later, and then everyone's like, oh yeah, I love them, and it's just like, what?
Yeah.
And then you'll say, because everyone tried to cancel them, or everyone cancelled them, and it's like, but he just headlined a festival. Is that cancelled?
Right.
Like,
well,
what?
and that's the biggest thing, is like the biggest thing that people need to understand is you are not obligated to like someone, to mess with someone, to support them financially, to want to, support them on social media, to want to follow them, to want to give them money, because going to somebody's concert is giving them money. I'm not obligated to have to do that. So that's, first and foremost. But it's like the reason why I can just live my life as like a normal individual, and I don't like act like I have to tiptoe around saying certain things to offend people, and why I don't worry about that, because I'm myself, and I have good intentions, and I know I educated myself. I did the work, because even as a marginalized individual, I can still do more work, because there's there's other marginalized demographics that I don't fall under, but I still need to do right by them. So I made sure I put forth the effort to do little things that could, to where I don't have to think about this. I'm not crying about why I have to change up this terminology about this, type of ice cream that I used to eat as a child, because I'm trying to be more mindful of the indigenous community. How often do I use that word to where I feel the need to, I don't feel the need to get on Twitter fighting for why I want to be able to say this word, when it's like, you probably use that word once every 7 years.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's you'll be all right.
You'll be
live.
fine.
Yeah.
You'll be fine. Yeah, I say that.
It's just that aversion to change, isn't it? People, and I think blame. If somebody says something that we don't say anymore, or we're trying to get rid of that word, they just instantly feel this like blame, that they're just like, you're trying to make out like I'm so horrible, and it's like, no, I'm simply saying this small thing. But it's like I think they group it with, with everything else, and it becomes this huge defense. And it's like, we all say things wrong. We don't want to look at our Facebook posts from when we were kids from like then, but like even to like the last year, there's been every year there's like new things where it's like, we don't say this anymore, we don't say that anymore, and it is a lot to keep up with. And sometimes it is like, I don't know how to refer to this or that. You are constantly learning, but it's just not that hard.
It's not hard, and it doesn't impact your life really
No.
in any kind of negative way, and it is obviously impacting other people's lives in a negative way. So it's a very small thing that you can do, is just mind your language that you use and be aware. Another kind of defense I see people use is the virtue signaling defense, and I don't want to look like I'm just virtue signaling, so I'll do nothing. And it's like, okay,
so much easier to avoid than they realize. Like it's wow,
very
I literally know people in my life that do it. Like a lot of people don't understand this, but my own mother is white, so it's like, hey, guess what, she's avoided doing this her whole entire life, and it was very, very easy for her. Wow. And her children are black, like no brainer there. But it's like, people throughout my whole entire community, we do it every day. It's not that difficult. You know what I mean? Because there's nobody in the world that is a part of every single marginalized demographic. There's just not. If we're able to do it, you can too. But guess what? The huge difference between most of us and most of them is that, more than half the time we're actually willing to do that, but they're not willing to.
I think that's such a good place to wrap up. Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us today. Like the chat has been
having me.
Absolutely loving it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
You're welcome to have me back at any time.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, good luck with the rest of everything. You're killing it. Good job.
I appreciate you being here. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Good night.
Bye,
Catch you later. Thank you so much for watching. You can follow Pikachulita via the links in the description, and please feel free to leave any opinions or feedback in the comments below. We love to read them. These episodes are all available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so we'll see you here soon for episode 4.